Two legendary leaders shared a dangerous secret about their Soviet allies. But could one general's outspoken warnings actually reshape the war's endgame? While Europe burned, Churchill watched Eastern territories slip into Stalin's grip. Patton saw the same threat unfolding, yet his blunt words cost him everything. What controversial statement got Patton disciplined by Eisenhower? Why did Churchill desperately cable Truman about Prague in April 1945? How did rank differences silence strategic warnings? The answer reveals why foresight alone couldn't change history's course. The unlikely alliance. As World War II entered its final months, two powerful men watched the same storm approaching from the east. Winston Churchill, Britain's determined prime minister, and General George Patton, America's most aggressive tank commander, both saw something their allies refused to acknowledge. While the world celebrated the defeat of Germany, these two leaders recognized a new threat rising from the ashes. The Soviet Union, once a necessary partner against the Germans, was now positioning itself to dominate half of Europe. Churchill paced the halls of power in London, sending urgent messages across the Atlantic. Patton commanded his Third Army on the ground, witnessing Soviet behavior firsthand. Both men shared the same fear that defeating one enemy might have unleashed something far worse. Their concerns weren't just military calculations, they were warnings about the future shape of the world. But here's what most people don't know. Despite seeing the same danger, these two men operated in completely different worlds of power. Why couldn't these two powerful leaders simply join forces and change everything? Churchill's growing fear. By April 1945, Churchill's anxiety had reached a breaking point. Soviet forces were sweeping across Eastern Europe like a red tide, and the British Prime Minister could see the post-war map being redrawn in Stalin's favor. He picked up his pen and drafted an urgent cable to President Harry Truman, the new American leader who had just taken office after Roosevelt's sudden passing. Churchill's message was direct and desperate. He wanted Patton's Third Army to race toward Prague, the capital of Czechoslovakia, before Soviet troops could claim it. In Churchill's own words, liberating Prague might make the whole difference to the post-war situation in Czechoslovakia. This wasn't just about one city. Churchill understood that whoever controlled Prague would control the heart of Central Europe. He believed that if American forces could reach the city first, it might stop the Soviet advance and preserve some independence for the Czech people. The cable revealed Churchill's deepest strategic concern. Eastern Europe was slipping away, and time was running out. But did Truman listen to Churchill's urgent warning? Patton's dangerous words. General Patton never learned to keep quiet about his beliefs. While politicians spoke carefully about their Soviet allies, Patton said exactly what he thought, and it cost him dearly. In one particularly explosive moment, Patton declared that America and Britain had destroyed a justly proud race, referring to the Germans, and were now about to allow the Russian savages to take over. These weren't private thoughts whispered in a closed room. Patton spoke openly, and his words spread quickly through military circles and eventually reached Washington. His commander, General Eisenhower, was furious. Eisenhower understood that such statements could damage the fragile alliance with the Soviets and create a political nightmare back home. The disciplinary action was swift. Patton was reprimanded, his career damaged by his inability to stay silent. But here's the crucial question. Was Patton wrong about what he saw, or was he simply saying out loud what others only dared to think? If Patton was seeing the truth, why didn't his warnings change anything?
The power gap. To understand why Patton's warnings went nowhere, you need to understand how military power actually works. General Patton was an army commander, a powerful position, but nowhere near the top of the decision-making pyramid. Grand strategy, the big plans that shape entire wars and their aftermath, wasn't decided by generals in the field. Those decisions happened in rooms occupied by heads of state: Churchill, Roosevelt, Truman, and Stalin, along with the combined chiefs of staff. Patton was several levels below this elite group. His job was to execute operational plans, not create them. Think of it like a company. Patton was a regional manager, highly skilled and respected, but the board of directors made the major decisions without consulting him. Eisenhower, Patton's direct superior, designed the plans that Patton followed. Even Eisenhower had to answer to political leaders in Washington and London. Patton could see the Soviet threat clearly from his position on the ground, but his rank meant his voice barely reached the rooms where the real decisions were made. So if rank kept Patton powerless, what about Churchill? Couldn't Britain's leader force a change? Churchill's frustrating battle. Churchill discovered something frustrating. Even prime ministers can't always get their way, especially when dealing with a more powerful ally. Throughout the war, Churchill had pushed for what he called peripheral strategies. He wanted Allied forces to attack through the Mediterranean, which he famously called the soft underbelly of Europe. He also advocated for advancing into Eastern Europe to block Soviet expansion. But American military and political leaders consistently rejected these ideas. The Americans had a different vision: focus everything on the main effort in Northern Europe, defeat Germany as quickly as possible, and worry about the Soviets later. The United States was providing most of the resources and manpower for the final push into Germany, which gave American leaders the final say on strategy. President Roosevelt and later Truman refused to consider immediate post-war conflict with the Soviets. The thought of fighting another massive war right after defeating Germany seemed impossible. The American military calculated that such a conflict would require vast resources and countless lives. Churchill's warnings fell on ears that simply weren't ready to listen. With both Churchill and Patton sidelined, what actually determined the strategy? Patton's personal disasters. Patton's controversies went far beyond his anti-Soviet statements. His career was marked by incidents that created political headaches for American leadership. In Sicily, during the summer of 1943, Patton visited field hospitals where he encountered soldiers suffering from what we now call post-traumatic stress disorder. Patton, believing they were cowards, slapped 2 soldiers in separate incidents. When news of these actions reached the public, it created an enormous scandal. Later, after Germany's defeat, Patton made comments about denazification that seemed to defend former members of the German government. Each controversy was a disciplinary issue that damaged Patton's standing within the U.S. command structure. For Eisenhower, these incidents were political nightmares that required careful management. But here's what's important: these controversies never touched the fundamental Anglo-American grand strategy. That strategy was agreed upon by governments and high commands, operating far above Patton's level. His personal problems were distractions, not factors that could reshape the alliance's core plans for winning the war and managing the peace. If Patton couldn't change strategy and Churchill couldn't either, who actually controlled the endgame? The real power structure. The truth about wartime strategy reveals an uncomfortable reality. Foresight alone means nothing without the power to act on it. Both Churchill and Patton saw the Cold War coming with remarkable clarity. They understood that the Soviet Union would dominate Eastern Europe if left unchecked. They recognized that defeating Germany might simply replace one threat with another. Their strategic instincts were nearly identical regarding the Soviet danger. But neither man could translate these insights into action. Churchill lacked the military resources to enforce his vision. Britain was exhausted after 6 years of war, dependent on American support for everything. Patton lacked the political authority. He was too low in the command structure to influence decisions made by presidents and prime ministers. The Anglo-American grand strategy had already been set through agreements between Roosevelt, Churchill, and their combined military staffs. Those agreements prioritized defeating Germany through Northern Europe, maintaining the alliance with the Soviets, and postponing any confrontation with Stalin until after the war ended. Individual leaders, no matter how perceptive or determined, couldn't override these established policies. So what does this reveal about how history actually unfolds?
The final answer. The story of Patton and Churchill reveals a harsh lesson about power and prophecy. Being right about the future doesn't give you the ability to change it. Both men correctly predicted the Cold War, the Soviet domination of Eastern Europe, and the decades of tension that would follow. Yet their controversies, warnings, and strategic insights ultimately changed nothing about the war's outcome. Patton's outspoken remarks got him disciplined, but didn't alter American policy. Churchill's desperate cables about Prague were politely noted and then ignored. The rank differences between Patton and the decision-makers silenced his warnings before they could reach the top. The power differences between Britain and America meant Churchill's concerns were secondary to American priorities. In the end, grand strategy wasn't shaped by those who saw the clearest or warned the loudest. It was determined by those who controlled the resources, commanded the armies, and sat in the highest rooms of power. Foresight alone couldn't change history's course, only power could, and neither man possessed enough of it when it mattered most. And that's why the post-war world looked exactly as they feared, despite their warnings. So now you know the truth. Two brilliant leaders saw the future clearly, yet couldn't change a single decision. Patton's bold warnings cost him his career. Churchill's desperate pleas fell on deaf ears. The Cold War they predicted arrived exactly as they feared. Sometimes being right isn't enough. Power decides history, not prophecy. If this story amazed you, like and subscribe for more untold war stories. What historical figure do you think saw the future most clearly? Comment below.